Space, the final frontier. This is Edge of Eternities and our 8-week mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no planeswalker has gone before. And that's exactly what we're going to be starting off today by talking about the set itself, its mechanics, and of course, key cards to watch out for. But before we get into all that, allow me to take a moment for some real talk. You're most likely here at the Stronghold because you've taken notice of the value-oriented content that I make. It may seem out of this world, but the truth is mid-range channels like this only make it thanks to viewer support. The reality is YouTube simply doesn't do enough ad share profit sharing to cover even basic cost of operations for a channel like mine. I've never envisioned the Stronghold as a way to make money, but having it reach a level of self-sufficiency would be really nice. And hey, I'm all about value, and that effort doesn't fall short in my Patreon. For as little as a $1 a month pledge, you get access to additional content, analysis, and tools, as well as a shout out in most every YouTube video I produce. The list and draft analysis alone could easily add $1 or more to your collection every month. Best of all, your support goes right back into the channel and the expanding content I produce. There's a link to my Patreon page in the description below, so I'd appreciate it if you take a moment and check it out. Every bit of support, no matter how small, makes a huge difference to our future. Thanks so much for your time and consideration. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. The success of Edge of Eternities, very similar to the science fiction fantasy that it emulates, will very likely come down to just how well their mechanics work. Perhaps one of the largest defining factors for Edge of Eternities is that it is what we call a land matters set. And of course, that dictates that landfall as a mechanic will get another boost, not only in standard, but on Arena in general. Take EU Social Engineering, a 5-mana enchantment that whenever a land you control enters, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact token. Pretty nifty stuff. Recently, landfall has not really impacted standard, but a lot of things have changed over the last couple weeks and will continue to change over the next couple of weeks moving forward. So there's a good chance that landfall, particularly mono green landfall, has a real shot at relevance, not just for the budget community, but for standard in general and perhaps beyond. Edge of Eternity's sci-fi feel is also bringing us an entire bonus sheet of rare and mythic land cards for your Eternal collection. Things like a Reflecting Pool should be of particular interest for budget players as it helps to smooth out your mana curve for a relatively low cost that is also very versatile and will switch between multiple decks with ease. Cards from the bonus sheet are expected to appear in packs both in the Arena store as well as Arena Limited, approximately 1 in 8 packs. Or to put it another way, less than what you might be used to seeing with the Final Fantasy bonus sheets. And of course, Edge of Eternities was not going to let Standard be outdone. It's bringing in at least 5 of the Shocklands. They haven't specifically said that the other 5 aren't going to be there, but I don't expect it at this point. In addition to the red-white Boros Shockland that you see on your screen, we have had confirmed the Orzhov white-black, the Simic blue-green, Gruul red-green, and Dimir blue-black. These are some of the best lands ever printed for Magic the Gathering. Having them back in Standard is certainly a big boost, and this is one of those times that you should feel good about crafting a 2-color dual land. I know I advise against that, but the shock lands are the exception to the rule here. So, go nuts, guys. Many years from now, in a world far, far away, perhaps the thing that Edge of Eternities will best be remembered for are lander tokens. These allow you to basically tutor up a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, allowing not only deck thinning and ramping, in much the same way that clue tokens allow us to draw cards, which were first introduced in Innistrad and now have become virtually evergreen and appear in any set they wish, due to their simple elegance. And last but not least, in the topic of lands matter for Edge of Eternities, we have a new land type. Because, of course, what set these days would be complete without a new land type? This is the third in under a year. But we are introducing planets. In this set, it looks to be only a 5-card cycle of mythic rares, with one planet representing each of the 5 core colors. They enter tapped, they tap for their specific color, and of course, this brings about the next mechanic of concern.
Station!
Yes, so Station is the bread and butter mechanic of Edge of Eternities, and in large part is going to determine how we look back on this set years from now. Was it successful? Was it not? And really is going to define the success or potentially failure of its limited environment. And to be perfectly frank, I'm a little apprehensive, and we'll get into that more in a moment. But if we take a look at the planet card that I mentioned earlier, we can get a better look at how this mechanic actually works. If you notice that number down in the lower left-hand corner of the text box, it in this case reads 12 plus. And what that is charge counters. And for all station cards, the way to add charge counters is by tapping creatures. And when you do so, you put a number of charge counters equal to its power. Now, as I said a moment ago, this is 12 charge counters, and that can be an awful lot. That's 12 power that forego attack more often than not. And that's a pretty huge potential cost. In this case, the Titanic God Core, once you get those 12 charge counters, this basically becomes Tolarian Academy, which was a ridiculously powerful card back in the day, so much so that it has been banned or restricted in multiple formats over the years. So it's not like these cards don't pay off in a big way, but how often will they really get there, and was it worth the cost, is the question that remains to be answered. The planets with Station are kind of the exception to the norm, as most of these are going to look more like vehicles to many recent players. For instance, Specimen Freighter here is a 6-mana artifact spacecraft. That's a new artifact subtype. And when it enters, return up to 2 target non-spacecraft creatures to their owner's hand. And of course, it has the station mechanic. However, once it becomes fully stationed, in this case for 9 counters, it becomes a 4/7 creature with flying. And whenever it attacks, defending player mills 4 cards. And unlike a vehicle, that status change to become a creature is essentially permanent as long as it maintains its station counters. Not a lot of things are going to change that once you've added it to the individual creature, but of course, mechanically, that can happen. For instance, these charge counters could be proliferated on, but that having been said, I think the only thing legal in Standard when this is going to be released is going to be doubling season, which obviously would potentially double the pace at which you're adding counters. There are also effects throughout the history of Magic that likewise affect how counters are put on, adding more or removing them directly. But again, I don't know of any others in Standard at the time of Edge of Eternity's release. Our next mechanic is very closely related to Station, but first, these words.
All decks are ready, sir.
Engage. Engage.
Execute.
Course laid in, sir.
Engage.
Lay in and intercept course and engage at maximum warp.
Sir.
Step on it. Engage. Make it so.
Captain.
Warp 6. Engage. Do it.
Shields at maximum. Warp 3. Engage.
Let's go.
Go. Hit it. Make it so.
Punch it.
Execute. Carry on.
Let's fly.
Course laid in, sir. She's ready. Engage.
Yep, that's right. Edge of Eternities is going to be taking us to warp speed. And if when you hear the word warp, you think about going fast, you are absolutely on the right track. Warp is an alternative casting cost, and when you use it, the permanent comes into play, and then at the end of the turn, you exile that permanent, and you can cast it for its regular casting cost on a later turn, meaning it works very similarly to Adventures, although technically not quite the same because Adventures are generally sorceries and instants, and Warp is pretty exclusively permanent. We briefly looked at this card earlier in the video referencing to Landfall. But now if we look at the warp cost, you can essentially pay 1 and a green, bring it into play. It will do its landfall trigger things until end of turn, at which point it will exile, and you can cast it for the 3 and 2 green to more permanently put it on the battlefield as an enchantment again in a later turn. So you may be asking, what does this have to do with Station? Well, many of the permanents with warp also happen to be creatures, and the fact is most of them don't have haste. So you're not going to be swinging in with it, and it's not going to be around during your opponent's turn to block for you. So there's very little reason not to tap this to help pay some of the station cost before the permanent leaves play. And in fact, in some cases, like Bygone Colossus, this appears to be the entire purpose of the card. Now, of course, many of these warp permanents also have enters or leaves triggers, so there is some value beyond their stationing capability. In much the same way warp was tied to stationing, our next mechanic, Void, is similarly tied to warp mechanic. The reason being that permanents or instants and sorceries that have Void care if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or if you have warped a spell this turn. When those things have occurred, it gains additional benefits. Void is also nearly exclusive to black spells and permanents, but not entirely. Void Forged Titan, for instance, is a 5-mana 5/4 artifact creature robot warrior. It has a void effect at the beginning of your end step. If a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, you draw a card and lose a life. And you're going to find this, again, mostly on black cards, and I think we've seen one red card at the time of recording. Although it's not technically a mechanical issue, I do think it's worth talking about that there are only 10 lower rarity gold cards in this set. Those, of course, being the 10 two-color signpost uncommons, one for each archetype. That makes this set the least gold that we have seen in a very long time, certainly more than a year. In a way, it sends a very strong signal that this is almost a monocolor matter set. In fact, the only thing that's really keeping it from being just that is the lack of a mechanical reward for being monocolor, and of course the presence, almost omnipresence, of lander tokens within the set at lower levels kind of sends the opposite signal, because adding a second or possibly even third or more color should be relatively easy. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, particularly in the limited environment, but the reality is it's going to be a couple weeks before we really know how that shakes out. And speaking of the two color archetypes within the set, we have a pretty interesting mix of archetypes that are very heavily centered on set mechanics, as well as a few that really aren't dependent on the set mechanics at all. The blue-black Dimir as well as the blue-red Izzet decks are both very centered in artifacts, the first being a bit more controlling and the second a bit more on the aggro verge. The blue-red Boros deck is very interested in having stations and, by extension, tapped creatures. And the black-white deck is another go-wide variation with a little bit of a sacrifice as well. The black-red Rakdos is built entirely around Void and will thrive or fail on that similarity. The red-green Gruul as well as the green-blue Simic are both Lands Matters decks. The first being centered around landfall and lander tokens, the second being a more traditional go big or go home ramp style deck. The less mechanically inclined decks bring in more traditional archetypes. Blue-white wants you to cast 2 spells in a turn. The green-white is a +1/+1 counters deck, and of course the ubiquitous black-green Graveyard Matters deck makes yet another appearance. I'm beginning to think that the folks at Wizards of the Coast design team have no other concepts for what that particular color pair should be. Hey guys, as we get started with this budget perspective, let me get you to lean in real close. I got a secret for you. It turns out higher rarity cards are good. Okay, I admit that's not much of a secret, and that's exactly why I'm not going to spend our time talking about all the good rares and mythics. There are plenty of other content creators willing to do that. And since I know that a budget player following our plan is only about 70% likely to have any given rare and only about 50% likely to have any given mythic, with the actual playset statistics going even further down than that very rapidly, I'm just not going to spend our time that way. Instead, I'm gonna turn our magnifying glass towards those commons and uncommons, because, you know, those are cards you're going to have, and I want you to be able to get the most bang for your buck. As always, I'd like to start our conversation of individual cards with those few rare exceptions. Anti-Causal Vestige is a 6-mana Eldrazi creature, the only Eldrazi in the set. When this creature leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Then you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from your hand onto the battlefield. It's a 7/5 stats, and it also warps for as little as 4 mana. This really reminds me of Solemn Simulacrum, aka Sad Robot. It is just so much potential value, really like maybe even a 3 or 4 to 1 here. Just really intriguing amounts of value. I think this is going to be an absolute all-star for budget players and something that we want to add to our collection as soon as economically feasible. I think you also need to keep an eye on Thrumming Hive Pool, a 6-mana artifact with affinity for slivers. Slivers you control have double strike and haste. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create 2 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens. Now, don't be confused. This is not going to be day 1 good. But Lorwyn Eclipsed is coming the first part of the 2026 calendar year, and more than likely going to be bringing changelings, which are, of course, slivers, with them. And all of a sudden, this card is going to go from the rare no one cares about or only gets played in control decks to a card that is all of a sudden creature type relevant. I think there's also a strong possibility that in the unannounced portion of the 26 calendar year, or maybe the 2027 calendar year, we may see an entire set which is the origin story of slivers. For those that weren't around, when these were introduced, I believe in the Stronghold set, it was very clearly communicated that slivers did not come from that plane of existence, and we never really found out where they do come from. And, well, the time for slivers in Standard may come yet again as they answer that question from beyond the edge. We've talked earlier about the fact that Edge of Eternities is a land matters set, and there is a distinct sub-theme that rewards you for having lands of different names. In other words, the more different lands you have, the better certain cards will be. Survey Mechan is one of those. For 4 mana, you get a 1/3 flying robot with hexproof. And for 10 mana, you can sacrifice it and it deals 3 damage to any target. Target player then draws 3 cards and gains 3 life. This ability costs X less to activate, where X is, you guessed it, the number of differently named lands you control. Now, in general, for limited, I think these cards fit best into the Simic ramp deck, but I also think it's worth noting that these could be very rewarding and versatile cards for your Brawl decks, and I think we're going to have to do some testing on that and see how much reward is really there. And of course, don't forget, the bonus sheet for this set is nothing but lands that all have different names. And wrapping up those colorless, highly versatile contenders, Virulent Silencer looks to be a nice build around for any budget player that is considering putting the poison threat back into Standard after it rotates with Phyrexia All Will Be One. Whether this will be good or not remains to be seen, but I think it might have more potential than Finn the Fangbearer. We'll just have to test it and see. There might even be some quirky hybrid deck between the two, but I'm not seeing it just yet. Alright, so let's bring a little color into the discussion with a couple of white cards that I think really illustrates how powerful Warp can be as a tool for budget players. Let's start with Starfield Shepherd. It's a 5 mana angel, 3/2 with flying. When it enters, search your library for a basic plains card or a creature card with mana value 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then, of course, the obligatory shuffle. It also warps for just 2 mana, 1 and a white. So let's say we're on turn 4, and we've curved out, we've got 4 mana, and we warp in Shepherd. It comes down as a 3/2. We can tap it and station something if we so desire. And of course, we get that ETB trigger that, well, kind of sort of tutors up and draws us a card. Then, with our other 2 mana, let's warp in All Fate Stalker, a 4 mana 2/3 Drix Assassin. This one, when it enters, exile up to one target non-assassin creature until this creature leaves play. Of course, since we warped it, All Fate's Stalker is going to leave play at the beginning of our end step. So we warp in All Fate's Stalker, and we target our warped in Starfield Shepherd. It leaves immediately upon entering of All Fate's Stalker. At end of turn, All Fate's Stalker exiles itself off the battlefield so we can cast it later. That allows Starfield Shepherd to come back into play with absolutely no memory of the fact that the prior version had warped itself in. So we just get to keep the full 5 mana version, and we get the ETB trigger again. These are both uncommon, so assembling this in Limited would be difficult, but certainly not impossible. And I think this is enough potential card advantage that it's worth exploring in Constructed Standard as well. Maybe even Alchemy, depending upon what else is going on. And of course, All Fate's Stalker is not the only blink effect that we currently have in Standard, so I think this is something we need to keep an eye on and give some testing time. As always, I'd like to start our conversation of individual cards with those few rare exceptions. Anti-Causal Vestige is a 6 mana Eldrazi creature, the only Eldrazi in the set. When this creature leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Then you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from your hand onto the battlefield. It's a 7/5 stats, and it also warps for as little as 4 mana. This really reminds me of Solemn Simulacrum, aka Sad Robot. It is just so much potential value, really like maybe even a 3 or 4 to 1 here. Just really, really intriguing amounts of value. I think this is going to be an absolute all-star for budget players and something that we want to add to our collection as soon as economically feasible. Codecracker Hound is an interesting example on a warp card, as its warp and primary mana cost are exactly the same. When it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one into your hand and the other into the graveyard. I think that might make him the goodest boy in the set. Scour for Scraps is one of those classic tutors that I just love to ramble on about. But in this case, for 4 mana, you've really got to be able to do both effects here. This first is search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then the obligatory shuffle. The second is return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. We've got a lot of ways to tutor up artifacts. And to make this one efficient at 4 mana, like I said, you've really got to be able to do both, which is going to take a very dedicated artifact deck that is also potentially doing some graveyard shenanigans. Red's got a little bit to offer to the budget community as well. Starting off with Full Bore, a 1 mana instant that gives target creature you control +3/+2 until end of turn. If that creature was cast for its warp cost, it also gains trample and haste. Folks, this is probably the real reason that Heartfire Hero got a somewhat unexpected ban. Moving on from that, Terrapact Intimidator, 2 mana, 2/1 is kind of everything you want in a 2-drop, particularly in Limited. When it enters, target opponent may have you create 2 lander tokens. If they don't, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. Really, cards that tend to give your opponent a choice tend to be worse on average, because of course your opponent is always going to take the option that is least painful for them. But between 2 instances of ramp or increasing the power toughness of your creature by 2, is it really a good choice here? I'm overall very impressed by the Kabu in this set at lower rarities, and I wonder if red might be a very strong force in Limited because of it. Mono with Circuit Feeder doesn't look great on a first pass as a 6 mana 4/4 with flying. But really, this does a lot of work for the right deck. It's an artifact creature in its own right, and when it enters until end of turn, target creature you control gets +X+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. And of course, it's going to see itself, so even on an empty board, it's going to give something +1/+0. Simultaneously, it gives target creature an opponent controls -0/-X. So again, in the right deck that has built itself around artifacts, this is going to do major impact, not only potentially removing a creature from your opponent's board as a blocker, but giving you a more meaningful attack. Close Encounter is a fight spell of the third kind. It is a 2-mana instant, and when I say it's the third kind, let me clarify that a little bit. We have fight spells where both creatures deal damage to each other equal to their power. Then we have bite spells where your creature deals damage equal to its power to an opponent's creature and takes no damage itself. Close Encounter here doesn't really even need your creature to stick around. As an additional cost to cast this spell, choose a creature you control or a warped creature card you own in exile. Close Encounter, aka the spell, not the creature, deals damage equal to your creature's power to your opponent's creature. The nice thing about this is they can't remove your creature in response and fizzle Close Encounter. It's still going to go through, it's still going to remember what that creature's power was. And when you add in, at least for the limited environment, the fact that you can use a warped creature that isn't even on the board yet, this may be the most versatile fight, bite, third kind spell we've ever seen. So there it is, guys, my thoughts on this set. We've got 2 other releases scheduled for the remainder of the 2025 calendar year, and both of those are going to be Universes Beyond inspired sets. So of course, allow that to dictate how you respond to this set accordingly. Whether that is going to be positive or negative is, well, really your business. As for me, I plan to do the basic plan on this, although I did use some of the reserved funds that have been provided through various means to pick up 50 additional packs of this set. That's right, I'm pretty all in. And of course, the remainder of the video will be that basic plan for 2025 for those that are not familiar or may need a refresher. As we transition into the gold, dollar, and cents part of the budget, there's one key factor that we've really got to take into account, and that, of course, is scheduling. Here we are in the year of our Lord 2025, and Wizards of the Coast is releasing 6 standard release premiere sets, 3 of which are going to be Universes Beyond, and 3 of which are going to be more contemporary sets. The interesting thing here, or potentially frightening depending upon how you look at it, if we look at the 2023 release budget year, we had 4 sets, the 2024 had 5, and now here we are at 6. Back in 2023, we could very comfortably look at something like uncommon completion numbers that were going to hit in the high 90 percentile. Well, now with 6 sets, we're projecting to be lucky if we hit 75%. So that means we've got 2 real choices. We either need to accept less, which might be perfectly valid, more on that in a moment, or we've got to grind a little bit more and work a little bit harder at the plan. Now, for those that are willing to accept a little bit less, well, that's perfectly valid. I won't fault you for that. In particular, looking at some of the thematics with highly themed sets like Ether Drift and Edge of Eternities, which, if you don't know, is going to be the space-themed set. And then you've got Universes Beyond, things like Final Fantasy and Spider-Man. it's perfectly reasonable that not every set is going to be for every player. So what you could do is play a little less hard, end up with a little less resources on all 6 sets, or it might be a better choice for you individually to maybe sit out a set or 2 this year if you aren't quite as interested in those themes. Like Spider-Man is not going to be for everybody. I personally am really looking forward to that set. I loved the comic books growing up as a kid. I've loved most of the movies, but to each their own. I won't fault anybody for the decisions that they make. For those that opt to follow the plan and keep their grind right where it is, that means you're going to end up with about an average of 73,000 gold per set. And really that doesn't feel all that different. And with that 73,000 gold available to you each and every season, that's going to allow you to do about 7 jump-ins on average, 2 quick drafts, buy 45 packs of the current set, or shift some of those to the Foundations packs if you're a very new player. It also puts you in a position to buy a gems deal every season, even though they may not offer it, and also allows you to take advantage of a discounted draft token every season, again, if it's offered. For those of you out there opting to take the current season a little bit lighter, there's still a few minimum sort of things that you want to do, just like that daily play, to make sure you are getting the minimum out of each and every set. The first being doing enough jump-in events to make sure that you can build a deck for that only constructed midweek Magic event. That is generally going to be a minimum of 3. You also want to make sure you are doing a draft event each calendar month so that you're getting your rank rewards. For most sets this season, that's going to be 2. So even if you don't buy any packs, you're still going to get 3 to 4 dozen free packs just by participating in that daily play, even if you aren't buying the Mastery Pass. That is going to give you enough commons and uncommons to get a very good feel for the particular set that is going on. We might need to use some of our wild cards earned during this season to fill in some of the more important blanks for future constructed, but that will pan out over time. Additionally, this will also leave you in a position to take advantage of any of those gem daily deals or draft token daily deals, and allow you to push 50,000 gold into the future season. And of course, for those that are interested in finding their own exact path, the budgeting spreadsheet tool that I use for all of these videos is available over on my Patreon. And of course, I want to take this opportunity to thank my supporting patrons, because being a small content creator comes with big bills. And I just couldn't do everything that I do without their monthly support. Thanks, guys. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful in your arena experience, we have a few suggestions for what you could watch next.